My name is Dr. Grace Telesco.
My name is Dr. Grace Telesco.
My name is Dr. Grace Telesco. I'm joined by Dr. Teresa Lily White,
Dr. Lenore Walker, Mr. Ed Denzel.
Investigation with Dr. T is something that actually was the brainchild of our dean, Dr. Durham. And now, coming up this next season, we're going to be doing it almost weekly, a weekly show on a Thursday night. So lots of really cool guests. It's not just police topics, it's not just corrections topics, but it's topics that are affecting us in kind of all areas. But one of the things that we hope to get across is raising awareness, educating about some of these really important topics like human trafficking, topics like disasters. We did a show, Confessions of a Serial Killer. So for this upcoming season, we've got a couple of really cool things. We're going to have a day in the life of a DEA agent. Another really cool one, which is really close to my heart, is going to be on September 11th. Because not only do we want to talk about 9/11 and the work of the NYPD, but I also want to really look at the mental health outcomes. We also have the human trafficking panel. We are going to bring back our Brevard Sheriff, Sheriff Wayne Ivey. It's always a pleasure to have him on. We're going to have Unfound again, Ed Denzel. He'll be coming back a few times, and that's going to be really exciting and interesting too.
So welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Telesco, Grace Telesco from the Fishler College of Education School of Criminal Justice. And we are live streaming on our YouTube channel. And I am so thrilled that tonight we have with us Dr. Dennis Hippert, the Associate Director of the Southern Police Institute. And he is responsible for the management of the continuing education and curriculum that's offered through the Institute, including course review and updates, new course development, faculty management. He manages technical assistance, consulting projects, and the daily operations of the staff. Dr. Hippert retired at the rank of captain from the Washoe County Sheriff's Office in Reno, Nevada, after 22 years of service. His comprehensive career includes experience in detention, patrol, courts, traffic enforcement, and he previously served as the director of the Northern Nevada Regional Intelligence Center. As an instructor, Dennis engaged students in both academic programs and practical applications in topics of police practice, evidence-based policing, and leadership development. He's also teaching for us as well as an adjunct in our School of Criminal Justice. He is a graduate of the 141st Administrative Officers course, and he holds a PhD in criminal justice with a concentration in organizational leadership from where? From NSU School of Criminal Justice, along with a Master's of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Louisville. Please help me welcome, with no further ado, Dr. Dennis Hippert. Dennis, I'm going to spotlight you right now, right here, and welcome.
Dr. T, thank you.
Oh, I am so
pleasure to be
psyched.
with you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Dennis was my student, and it's just a joy, to be able to mentor extraordinary human beings, and he's one of them. So I'm just so thrilled for all that you do. We're going to hear all about what you do. And why don't we start with a little bit of just kind of tell us a little bit about your career, your police career, and the trajectory to where you are today.
Oh, yeah, sure. So as you said, I was with the Washoe County Sheriff's Office in Reno. I started there, obviously, as a deputy sheriff in March of 2000. And throughout my career there was full service law enforcement agencies. So we had the jail, we had search and rescue, we had courts, we had patrol, we had investigations, we had everything. So it was a beautiful situation to always stay interested. If you got bored in a career at Washoe County, that was entirely on you, because there was so many options available to you just to move around within the agency and experience everything that law enforcement possibly had to offer. We offered it. So I moved around. I did exactly that as a deputy, as a sergeant, as a lieutenant. I was in detention, administration, I was in patrol. I worked the traffic unit. I was all over the place very proudly. So I left nothing on the table, so to speak, when I finally decided it was time to retire and move on. That came only 2 years ago when I had the unbelievable opportunity to come here to Louisville, Kentucky, and work in the Southern Police Institute in the Department of Criminal Justice here as the associate director, where essentially I'm responsible for the majority of our curriculum here. We focus heavily on police leadership development, and evidence-based policing, all completely my interests, my research interests. It really couldn't be a better situation for me. It's every day I wake up and pinch myself. It's like I'm living in a fairy tale. It's amazing.
I know I know exactly what you mean. That's how I felt when I was working in NYPD. There were times where I was just like pinching myself, like, am I really involved in all of this stuff?
This is really what I do.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I know for me, way back in the day, like the horse and buggy era, when I was on the job in NYPD, there were two tracks that an officer could go. One was the investigative track, the detective, route. And if not that, then specialized units, the SWAT, the dive team, the, mounted unit, K9, whatever. Depending on your area of expertise, your talent, your passion, your interest, all of that. And then there was the other track, and that was leadership, the leadership track, to be a boss, to become a boss. And for us, it was civil service. So we had like the civil service exams. We had the sergeant's exam, then the lieutenant's exam, then the captain's exam. And then after that, it was all by appointment. So like, what made you decide that you wanted that leadership track and not the other track?
Well, I mean, I really had a little taste of both. I did have some of those special assignments. I did work within some of those special units. I was pretty well known for being in the traffic unit in our agency. Still to my knowledge, I'm the only person who was ever on our motor team as a deputy sergeant and lieutenant. I think I'm still the only one who can say I held all three ranks. But as far as getting into leadership, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of us that choose that track do it because we've had a very poor example. And we get frustrated because of certain, I would hesitate to say incompetent, but poor leadership. And we experience what negative effects that have, not only on your career, but also on your personal life, on all aspects of your life, when you struggle with your leadership. And it's the same reason that I became a training officer, because I had training officers early in my career who frustrated me, and thought to myself, I can do this better. And I feel like I have the skills and the patience and communication ability to guide people in a different way, with kind of a more positive spin on everything we do. We're not very great at that in policing all the time, in remaining positive, especially not with each other. And I felt like I had the ability to bring that.
Yeah.
But that was really what motivated me originally. And then I think the toughest one, though, is your first promotion. I don't know if you'd agree, but I mean, that jump from being the officer level to sergeant is really what matters. That's life-changing.
Yeah.
But after that, you go up from sergeant to lieutenant to captain. Your duties are a little bit different, but it's not as difficult as a jump as that first promotion. That's really the tough one, I think.
I think it's interesting that you're saying that what motivated you, and I agree to a degree, that some of the bad bosses that we had, bad leaders, let's say, poor leaders, not effective, ineffective leaders.
That's right.
Help to motivate you to like become a boss, right? But I also was really, I guess I was really lucky and blessed to be able to have some some wonderful bosses in my life and in my career who help motivate me. I want to be like that. You know, in the same way, like now as a professor, and I've shared this with my students too, there were some professors that really shaped who I am today, you know, my teachers. And I look at them and I say, I want to be that for my students, you know. And so in the same way, when I was on the job, there were some bosses that were just amazing and great mentors, great guides, coaches, you know, managers. You just like looked up to them. They were amazing, and I wanted to be that, and so that motivated me to want to become a
I
boss.
I certainly experienced that as well, and I think that you know, unfortunately, I think it's just an aspect of human nature. It's the negative experiences that sometimes motivate you, and have a tendency to stick out in your memory a little bit more than the positive experiences. And if I were to calculate it, I would easily say that the positive experiences and the high quality leadership that I had by far outweighed any negative experiences. That certainly was the case throughout my entire career. But it is just those, you know, it takes some of those people you just can't believe. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we saying what we're
Uh,
saying?
yes,
And that
yes,
just kind of motivates you to, so if I can have a hand in steering the ship, then let me put my hand on the wheel because I want to go a different direction.
absolutely. Now, I don't know if you had a civil service exam that you had to take.
We did, yes.
Okay, so that's the same thing. So we used to joke, you know, lucky Saturday. This guy had a lucky Saturday, but he's not an effective leader.
Well,
Right? Because there's a difference between,
yeah,
and I love that you said that there's this distinction between the sergeant, which is the first line supervisor.
right,
That's a manager, right? And then when you get promoted to lieutenant and captain and commanding officer, and now you go into that real true leadership,
right.
less management and more executive leadership. And you find that that's true, right?
Oh, absolutely, I do. And that lucky Saturday you were talking about, I've always wondered that, and it's actually we're bouncing all over the map. I have a tendency to do that sometimes, but it's one of my very important research interests is to look into how exactly do we best prepare people for leadership roles within policing. Because it is evident to us, it's not simply scoring very high on a written test, but that's what we're stuck with in a lot of cases.
Yes.
So that doesn't tell the entire story on your preparedness to take on that role, but
Right.
we are so glued to it. And I certainly understand it with labor contracts, with political influence, with HR regulations. I completely get it, but I think that there has to be some other ingredient in the mix there that sorts out a real aptitude for leading people.
Yeah. Well, this is why I think some of the law schools are coming away from the LSAT.
Right.
Some are embracing that, but just like any standardized test, it doesn't tell the whole story, right? Of course,
Exactly.
we had in NYPD we had something called BMOC, which was a basic management and organizational skills course that you had to go through. But in your opinion, based on your experience, having been a leader, now involved in this in the Southern Police Institute, where you train leaders, you know, and that's what you do, that you're educating police leaders. What would you say are the characteristics or attributes that are most important for a police leader? And this would be for a manager, you know, at that managerial level, that first line supervisor, as well as, you know, higher up in the executive rank.
I in my experience, from my viewpoint, I think there's really two things that combine as far as the real skill that's needed for police leadership. And first and foremost is I think our police leaders need to need to build their ability in objective decision making, and not base decisions on emotion, on political slant, on any other factor other than objective reasoning into what do we really know is going to work in this situation. which is part of the battle. The second half of that is that our police leaders need to have the communication ability to adequately inform everybody in the agency about the value of the decisions that they've made. We have always had a paramilitary organization in policing. So we, I think, to a certain extent, fall back on that too much, where we think that I'm the sergeant, I'm the lieutenant, we're going to do this because I said we are going to do this. And we're learning, especially with some of the later generations that have come after me, that that tactic just does not work. It does not speak to people anymore. People don't want to fall into line like that. And we need to adjust. We need to accept that we have real thinking, feeling human beings, that we are trying to lead towards a common goal. We have to be prepared to communicate adequately with them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that communication is key, not only for how we interact with the community, but how we interact with each other. So
Right.
it all starts with that. You know, policing is 100% human oriented. And as human beings, we communicate, and some of us don't know how to communicate. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have, I think, in conflict resolution, right? Is like
Absolutely.
starts with relating. It starts with communicating. And speaking of relating, I know for me, and I'm not going to say that I was like the best leader. I was one of those, I think I was one of those bosses where they either loved me, adored me, or despised me.
I'm right there with you.
There was no middle. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, Lieutenant Telesco, you know, and it was either like, oh my God, they just adored me, or you know, they had my face like, you know, with a target on it. I also was the kind of leader that I led by example, and I never felt that there was a job or a task that was too big or too dirty that I didn't do myself with
Right.
them. You know, that I would get like
Right.
right in the trenches with them and do the work. And I think that that's something that was really was powerful for them, and made them see that I wasn't just kind of like talking the talk, but I was walking the walk. What do you think about that?
Well, I agree with that 100%. I think you and I are very much the same in how we were viewed by people that reported to us. I have always said that I don't have a lot of middle ground either. You love me or you hate me. That's just the way it is. But to give an example of what you're talking about, I don't know if NYPD was the same thing, but we traditionally in law enforcement, once you achieve those upper ranks, you tend to fall off on your training a little bit. We would attend the same training classes, but we would go to the administrator version, or we would maybe not go through all of the training exercises that the rest of our personnel were expected to go through. So, and recognizing that, in the interest of leading from the front, it was always my plan. I signed up for the very first training course, every training cycle. Let me get into that class on the very first day. And then nobody who follows me, nobody who reports to me can ever say, you don't know what we did, you don't understand it, it's too difficult to make it to training, all of those things, and take all of that right away, right out of the gate. That for very first class of a training cycle, you're going to see me in it, because I'm going to be as prepared as I can be. I need to know the same information everybody else knows. And as a leader, I need to know it slightly better. So let me get in there, get fresh. And then I'm also then, I suppose, the source of information for anybody else coming back from that training class. So just an example, I agree with you 100%. If we can be guilty of that in law enforcement leadership. Sometimes we achieve a certain rank and we think, well, I have a different job now and I stay at the desk, so these other things I don't have to do, and here's some unpleasant work, and here's a phone call I don't want to take, and here's a complaint I don't want to listen to, so I'll send somebody else to do it. And I think you're absolutely right that if you're going to display true, solid, positive leadership, then you should be taking the charge on those types of things. There's certain things you just should not be delegating or sloughing off.
One of the things I think that I had difficulty with is, and I bet I'm going to ask Justin and Layla later on to be honest with me in front of everybody, because they work with me. They're my production crew behind the scenes, and so they can really tell you this for sure. If I have an idea, or I have a goal, or I have a mission, right? And I have an idea, a strategy of how I'm going to achieve that, I would hold these staff meetings and I'd get them all assembled, and I'd say, okay, this is the problem, and here's a strategy that I think might be good. Like what do you all think? And if they didn't agree with me, I got so upset, and I wound up doing it anyway, the way I wanted to do it. And then I had like friends of mine who, I was a lieutenant, they were sergeants, and it pulled me aside and say, why did you ask us what we thought if you were going to do it your way anyway?
Right.
And I was like, well, I was just trying to get, your ideas, but I was hoping that they aligned with mine, and they didn't, so, how does a leader deal with that kind of thing where, here's the problem, you have a good idea of how you might want to, solve that or approach that problem with a strategy. And then you want to open it up to others, you're the rank and file, the people who are working for you, because you want them invested in it. You want them invested in the strategy. So you have them put their 2 cents in, but you kind of know what you're going to be doing anyway. That's like a minefield. How do you like handle that?
I think that that leads into another very key attribute of good leaders, and that's a healthy measure of humility. You have to recognize in nearly every situation, there'll be some situations where you're the utmost expert, but those are going to be few and far in between. And in reality, people who do the work day in and day out probably have the best ideas on how to make improvements. And it's very likely, we're very cyclical in law enforcement as well. An idea somebody comes up with today probably was done 15 years ago, and maybe we just don't remember it. But somebody will, and somebody will know the details of every situation to know why any endeavor is going to work or is not going to work. So you have to enter into every encounter that you have as a leader with that humility to be able to accept honestly people's feedback about what it is that you think that you should be doing. And I think that goes into all situations. It's not just in police leadership, but I'm sure you'll agree that even instructing at the university level, to teach an undergraduate class, as you speak to students and you give your perspective, it is the most refreshing thing in the world when you finally have a student who says, "Wait a minute, I don't agree with that," because it never happens. But if you've trained yourself to be confident, number one, and have that humility, it's the most refreshing thing in the world, because regardless of how strong my convictions are or how strong I believe them to be, they really aren't that strong if they don't stand up to questioning. So by all means, please question me, challenge me. Let's make sure the path that we're going to go down is the correct one. I think it is, but I can't possibly know for sure. So let's get some perspective, and please challenge me.
Yes. I think that, yeah.
You have to, but you have to build trust with that. You're not going to get that right out of the gate. You have to build that trust to know that there's not going to be, everybody needs to know that there's not going to be a consequence for standing up and saying, "No, I don't think you're right." Regardless, if you have that positional authority, that doesn't make you right all the time. You have to know that.
Right. And I think your gals, they're going to be watching you. They're going to be watching you. They're going to be seeing if you put your money where your mouth is. Do you stand up for them? Are you a people pleaser? That's another thing. It's like, we're not having a popularity contest
Right.
here. I'm not, I want you to like me. I do. Nobody wants to be disliked, and I definitely don't want to be talked about behind my back, but nobody likes that.
Right. Right.
But at the end of the day, we have a job to do, and I'm going to do my best to try to lead by example I'm going to try to be humble. I'm going to try to communicate well, because here's the thing. And I think that a lot of those ineffective leaders that I've noticed, they just don't communicate well. They're not directive enough. So you really have no idea. They're telling one person one thing, another person another thing, but there are
Yes.
no clear instructions here, and we're not all playing to the same sheet of music. So that makes it really difficult for a group of people to feel safe that they're being led in the right direction.
Right. Uh, Leadership is not for the faint of heart. As leaders, we are all about uncomfortable conversations. That's why we make the big bucks, as the saying goes. If everybody was going to like you and just do everything that you asked them to do, then you probably wouldn't be needed. Anyways, if everybody's just going to follow a policy manual, if they're just going to go and perform amicably in every situation all the time, then what would the purpose of leadership even be? It wouldn't be necessary.
We also hear a lot about like the authoritative leader, right? Versus the egalitarian, leader. Do you have any thoughts on this as far as like an integrated approach?
I do, and it does. You have to absolutely take the point of view that those leadership styles, number one, they're not absolute. You can it's like taking the Myers-Briggs personality test or determining what your love language is or any of those things. They're not 100%. You may have one attribute or one leadership style that presents itself to a higher degree or more often than the others, but everybody has some element of all leadership styles. So number one, you have to recognize that. And then it goes back to the objective decision making. You have to know, when is it appropriate for me to be a supportive leader? When is it appropriate to be authoritarian? When is it appropriate to be transformational? Any one of those different identified leadership styles are all appropriate in the right situation. If you're on a critical incident, if it's an active shooter, that's the time for authoritarian police leadership. It just has to be that way. There's not time to ask questions and communicate. But if you're talking about a much longer term police intervention strategy that's going to go on 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever it is, and you have all the time in the world, that isn't the time to take that same sort of leadership stance. So you have to, it goes into leadership training though. If you don't even know that all of those different styles are available to you, and you just show up and you say what you're going to say, and you haven't been educated and trained into different approaches for different people in different situations, then it becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult to be a positive, beneficial leader 24/7. A lot of us have our expertise in certain areas, be it tactical or with HR or in front of a camera or whatever it is. But in our industry, we have to do all of those things at one time or another. So we have to recognize that, and we have to be prepared to switch gears as necessary. We can't be the one trick pony.
Right. I think that's great that you said, it all really depends on the situation. And in a 9/11, right, which I was involved, there's a time and a place for we have to take action now.
Right.
We have to take action now. I know what you need to do. You do this, you do that, you go here. But if you have the time and you have the luxury, then you can get the investment from the rank and file and from the group. One of the things I think was challenging was morale. Police officers, because this is what my assessment is, that because of the type of job that we have and the stressors that are unstoppable and cumulative, and are not just specific to police work. It's also the stressors of life in general, coupled with the stress of the job, that we have a tendency, you said it earlier, to be a little negative and to complain. And And so how does an effective leader help boost morale in an environment that there's really not a lot of things, there's not a lot of incentives, there's not a lot of maybe strategies that or initiatives that you could pull out of your pocket as the middle manager or middle executive. You know, you're not the chief. If you're the chief, you've got a little bit more leeway. If you're the commanding officer of your unit, you still have all the powers that be above you, and you're working within those parameters. There's not a lot that you can do sometimes. So how do you effectively boost morale or meet morale or morale head on as a leader, as a good leader?
I'm glad you brought up the aspects of the job that we believe tend to damage morale. We do a lot of work in the officer wellness space, and we have done quite a bit of research within the Southern Police Institute on trauma and vicarious trauma that first responders are exposed to. And it's a growing knowledge base. We're starting to understand how those effects of the job, or how those aspects of the job really affect our personnel. And we are developing treatment plans and treatment interventions and awareness for all of that. And it seems to be working very well. We're taking giant leaps in that space. But to more directly answer your question, with especially the middle management, those sergeants, lieutenants, and captains in a mid to large size agency, it really comes down to the concept of organizational justice. Everybody understands procedural justice. We train that a lot within policing, and we don't pay appropriate attention to the concept of organizational justice, simply meaning treat employees fairly. Just play by the rules, don't play favorites. Do what you said you're going to do. Follow through. All of those same aspects that we're teaching police officers about procedural justice in their citizen contacts, all of those same aspects still exist, because all we're talking about, again, is human communication and human interaction. So if we just go out of our way to ensure that we're making fair decisions, we're treating people fairly within our organizations, I think we make a lot of headway right there. And a lot of the morale studies that have been coming out, I don't have any in front of me, but a lot of the literature on police officer morale says exactly that. Everybody enters policing understanding that there's going to be stressors and trauma as a result of the work that they do on the street. You're going to see horrible things. Every applicant knows that before they step in, but what they don't know that they're stepping into is a highly politicized environment, a very cutthroat environment, sometimes organizationally. So if we are preparing our police leaders to rise above that, to rise above the rat race, so to speak, which would mean we'd have to get our promotional procedures in line with identifying the most apt future leaders, rather than who takes the test the best or who politics the best or any of those other things. But I really do believe our officers are better served by just simply being treated fairly and being made to feel a part of the organization and valuable for everything that they bring to it, because every one of the officers brings something valuable. And it might not be the most obvious thing or any of those traditional police success measures. It might not be who makes the most arrests or writes most tickets or any of those things. You might have the officers who are just spectacular in working with victims of sensitive crimes. And we need to celebrate that, because that's not going to show up on any statistical measure that we keep about officer performance. That will never show up. But we have to identify in all of our personnel exactly the benefit that they're bringing to us, and then celebrate it and then ensure that everybody in the agency is always playing by the same rules and enforcing those rules equitably. And
But
then I think we
sometimes,
manage that.
but sometimes we do play favorites,
We
and
do.
we play favorites with the workers, those that rise to the top, the stars. I mean, you have your stars. You always do.
Sure.
You have the stars that kind of carry the unit or carry the squad or carry the, the department or whatever it is. And it's hard not to play favorites with the stars, isn't it?
It can be. And I think where that presents itself and where we really probably are not going to be able to make much headway there is just on impromptu conversations. As these things come up about, well, I did this today. Oh, great job. That's going to be a little more obvious to everybody. But what I mean is in things like their written yearly evaluations, things like promotional consideration, selection for specialized units. All of those things maybe don't always equate to who performed the best as a street cop. Maybe that isn't identifying exactly who has the most aptitude to be successful in another role. An example I can think of is homelessness is an incredible issue that most of us didn't see coming all over the country. In the past 5 or 10 years, it's exploded. So many police agencies are creating homeless outreach programs and specialized units who strictly exist for that reason. And they're doing fantastic work. But if you were an administrator and you were looking to select somebody for that type of a work or for that type of an assignment, where typically they'll identify people experiencing homelessness and they will offer services and they will find resources and all of those types of things. I have never seen evidence that the person who takes the most people to jail is going to be the best suited for that type of a role. We wear a lot of hats in law enforcement, but as leaders, we tend to only focus on certain outcomes when we make those considerations for promotions or specialized assignments. And
Sure.
it may not be the outcomes that directly match up with what we are looking for in those new roles.
Yeah, it's more holistic. It's a holistic approach.
Should be.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that we've been talking about. A lot of these attributes and characteristics that make a leader effective, especially in policing. And we know that there's an exam, and we know that there's training that you go through. Some executives in NYPD, it's like the coveted FBI National Academy appointment, which I'm sure that the Southern Police Institute is another kind of gem that folks are seeking to achieve, right?
Proudly, yes, it is.
Yes, that's wonderful. And you learn a lot. So you learn on the job. Some of us are born leaders too. Like,
Right.
we're effective because we just kind of like have that talent and that ability. It's innate in us. Training is important. What about education? So and I see training and education differently.
I see them very differently as well.
Good. So, and I'm kind of segueing into your dissertation and your study that you looked at in terms of undergraduate education and education overall. So, how important do you feel education and higher education is for leaders in policing?
I think it's critically important, especially in education, more in the liberal arts sphere. I think is critically important because it very directly matches the skills and attributes that we're looking for in our police leaders. It's not everything. If a police agency is willing to invest time in training and education in-house in some of the concepts that people generally learn in an undergraduate educational program, then I think that that would work just fine, but they don't have the budget, they don't have the resource, they don't have the time to do that. However, in any typical undergraduate program, a lot of those attributes that are absolutely critical in leadership are addressed, and they're addressed in a number of different ways. So I certainly anecdotally thought that, which is, and I certainly saw I saw the benefit in my own career, because I didn't enter policing with a degree. I entered with a high school diploma, and that was it. And I certainly understood internally how my higher education developed that a better worldview, I think, is a good way to put it. And it certainly helped me in my leadership. It helped me in policing all around.
I know for me, let's see, I made sergeant about 5 years after I was a cop. I was going for my bachelor's degree at the time. It took me like 8 years because I was going, one course at a time, practically. Very, very non-traditional sort of experience. And then my master's, I went for the master's at John Jay College. I did that in 2 years. And then I still wanted to continue on. I mean, I wanted to teach eventually. After my retirement, that was always my plan. That was always my chapter 2. But I really found that the master's, especially the master's education, and then into the PhD, totally helped support and augment my skills as a leader in the NYPD. So I'm sure you agree. I know you do, because
Absolutely.
that's why you went for your
Yes.
PhD. But can you tell us a little bit about your study and what interests you and the research questions and
Sure.
Anything about that, and then I can add a little bit about maybe methodology, and then we can talk
Absolutely.
about the results.
So it's always been very important to me. Leadership development has always been huge for me. And I've always felt that it's very important, but I never could really firmly understand what it is that we can do to adequately prepare our police officers to become police leaders specifically. So my study was always thought of as being a first step down the road to identifying what the best way to prepare people for police leadership positions is. So my starting point was to try to understand what the experience is for police leaders who have some level of higher education, and to try to understand exactly what it is that they brought from their higher education program into their career that was beneficial for them, of course, in some very specific ways. But I figured if we are going to evaluate, essentially, should a degree be necessary for somebody to get promoted to a police leadership role? Well, what is that actually going to do for anybody? What do you actually get out of a degree that translates into effective leadership? So that's where my study started from.
Great. So what I'd like to hear now, if you don't mind, is tell us a little bit about sort of the conceptual model, right? So what were you interested in knowing and examining? What relationships between variables were you interested in knowing?
So it wasn't my original design, but I ended up doing a qualitative study, and my study basically took 2 different bodies of research and tried to kind of glue them together. The first being, there's a lot of research that talks about higher education and policing, and looks at its effects on use of force frequency, use of force severity, citizen complaint frequency. A lot of these things in the research has showed that officers with degrees tend to use force with less frequency. They get fewer complaints about courtesy issues. And they tend to look for other resolutions to problems they face other than just simply let's take somebody to jail. The other body of research, going back to that, it very specifically talks about police officers, though, not police leadership. It talks about just that street level officer. The other body of research that I looked at discussed the influence that police leaders have over police officers on the street. And what it tells us is police sergeants specifically, especially the first line supervisors, have a huge amount of decision making or have a huge amount of influence on the decision making of the officers that report to them, even when they're not present. So kind of putting those together, if college degrees will lead our officers to lower use of force, lower citizen complaints, and fewer discretionary arrests, will there be, and the sergeants influence the officers to such a high degree, will there be a trickle down effect, so to speak, if it's the sergeant who has that higher education, has that degree, who is then instructing the officers? Will there be an effect if it's the leadership that has that higher education? And then will that translate to differences in officer performance on the street?
And so what was the methodology for you?
So I took a qualitative approach under kind of a grounded theory approach, because nothing is known about this. There's really no research, there's no literature out there that really talks about the officer level effects from leadership education. So I was starting from the ground up. So it was a natural point to just speak with I did in-person interviews with police sergeants and police leaders from all over the country, and asked them questions about your degree program. What did you cover that related to policing? And how do you use that in certain areas? So I asked questions such as, when you're guiding your officers on appropriate use of force, what aspects of your college degree program inform you on how you give direction to those officers? So that addressed the first research question. I was specifically interested in how do they guide their officers in use of force practices. Second is, how do you guide your officers in courtesy in their citizen interactions? And the third being, how do you give them direction when they have to make discretionary arrest decisions or discretionary enforcement decisions? Those situations where an officer could arrest somebody, or they could give them a summons to court, or they could give them a warning. And all of those different decisions would be supported by policy and law, but it's left to the officer's discretion in how it's ultimately going to be handled. We know that the police sergeants give direction as far as all three of those outcomes are concerned. That's part of why they exist. But I was interested in how they go about giving that direction and what aspects of their college degree informs them.
And so what did you find?
Mostly I found the sergeants who had that college degree, specifically a criminal justice degree, were very well prepared to take they had a wider worldview. They understood that every problem could not simply be resolved by, well, find somebody, arrest them, take them to jail, and away we go. They encouraged critical thinking in their officers to a very high degree. They were very well prepared to conduct case studies, exploration of case study in training environments, and to lead their officers through lessons learned in debriefs and in case studies. And they felt as though their communication skills, both writing and verbally, were significantly enhanced through their college education.
And
All
so-
all
yeah,
aspects that we want from our
Right.
police leaders.
right. So biggest takeaway then, biggest takeaway.
My biggest takeaway is I think that large scale, I think police chiefs and police administrations would probably be very well served if they started to look at degree requirements, especially as people move up the chain. Now, what level of degree is necessary? That's some future research that I hope to get into. If there's a difference between an associate's, bachelor's, master's, what's the level? I mean, I think we can just agree that we probably don't need every police sergeant to have a PhD. That probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
But is the level an associate's degree? Is it just some college? Is it bachelor's degree? We don't know. So that I think is the next step. But I do know, at least from the research that I conducted, that a lot of those critical attributes for police leadership are all represented in college degree programs. And they're all trained and educated in college degree programs, very specifically within CJ degrees, because they talk about communication and they talk about critical thinking with a very specific CJ slant. But regardless of the degree, those elements of communication and critical thinking are always going to be present. So even if it's an English degree, a communications degree, whatever else it is, I think agencies will still see that benefit.
Great. So here's the question. How does the Southern Police Institute play a role for police executives, for police managers, for whether they be, the first line supervisor, or, middle management or executive level in policing? What do you provide for them, and what any of our viewers that actually have the ability to apply, can you tell us a little bit about how the mechanics of that works?
So we have a range of programs, a range of leadership programs, going from our number one flagship program, the Administrative Officers Course, which is a 480-hour police executive leadership program. It's essentially and that's in residence here at the University of Louisville. You can think of it essentially as police leaders getting to go away from their agency for a 3-month research sabbatical. It's an opportunity that a lot of people don't get, but it's very beneficial. Another program of ours, our other flagship programs, the Command Officer Development Course, which is designed, that one's 400 hours, and it's designed to travel. It's we're holding the 95th course of the Command Officer Development Course in Miami right now, as a matter of fact. And then we also have a brand new first line supervisor training program that I've just completed, which will be available pretty soon. But the mission remains the same for all of those programs and for all of our leadership programs. And if I were to distill it down to a single statement about what we're trying to achieve, we are trying to cultivate evidence-based decision-making in police leadership. We want everybody to lean towards a future of scientific policing. And we address that through a number of different ways. We talk about leadership aspect. We talk about research. We talk about evidence-based policing. We talk about action research. We talk about administrative tasks to a certain extent, because that's necessary and it's expected of us. But I think the real takeaway from that our students receive is their exposure to the vast amount of policing literature that is available to them that can help guide their decision making. They shouldn't be just left to their own devices to throw things at the wall and see what sticks when they're facing a problem in their community, because there's mountains of research that should be informing that. We just have a disconnect between the academics and the practitioners. and it mostly comes down to the accessibility of all of those journal articles. We're not the only ones trying to bridge that gap. I think we're doing a significant service in that space. We're not the only ones, and I think it's a growing theme, as it should be within the industry, that we have our police executives especially, but all of our police leadership gaining those skills in taking a more scientific approach to their deployments. And that's really what we focus on.
Excellent, excellent. And so if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how do they do so if they're interested in getting one of your
The
courses or
absolute
enrolling?
best thing to do is to get on the Google machine and just type in the Southern Police Institute. Will pop up right away. Our full menu, so to speak, of courses is available, and we have recurring courses. We never stop. We're not on a traditional school schedule. We go 12 months out of the year, and we bring training literally all over the world. We've conducted classes overseas, and in nearly every state in the country. So any police agency is very welcome to engage with us and see about bringing our courses to their agency.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So I've got 3 questions from 3 PhD students.
Great.
They are PhD in criminal justice. They're our students.
I love it.
The first one is going to come from Will Escarment. I hope I'm saying that right. Will, did I pronounce your last name correctly? Escarment? Escarment? I just gave you talking privileges. You can.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
There you go. Yeah. Am I
Yes.
pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you actually did.
Okay, great.
So
Thank God. Thank God. I've only had you all semester. So
Right,
anyway,
right.
go ahead, Will. What's your question for Dennis?
So Dennis, I have a master's in management with a concentration in leadership. And oftentimes, in my line of work, I am a dependency case manager. I'm a lead in my unit, but I wanted to know for leaders that are in law enforcement, oftentimes they're required, to follow protocol as it relates to decision making. So I wanted to know, when teaching, what advice do you provide to your officers that may have to rely on, their instinct when having to make difficult decisions?
I think that just comes down to preparation. And I think that especially in policing, but in most fields, there's times when snap decisions have to be made. Decisions have to be made immediately. And in those cases, you have to rely back on your experience. It's the only thing that you can do. But those, at least in policing, as much as we get a lot of attention for those critical incidents, that really is a small percentage of the time that we spend, and those are a small percentage of the decisions that we make. So I would say we need to be more cautious and more objective, rational thinking decision makers. And remember, with policies are written to be changed as necessary. Nothing is ever set in stone. So if the literature is available, the research and the best practice is all available, which contradicts the policy, well, then decisions have to be made, and policies can be changed. And we do that all the time. We shouldn't shy away from that. I think it's a poor excuse to just simply say, I don't expect this to work, but it's what the policy said. So there you go. And now I'm going to go to lunch. I think the role we play in communities is too important to just wash our hands of things because that's the policy. Now I have been known to have a little bit of a contrarian personality in some cases, so it's pretty easy for me to do that, to just say, no, I don't like this policy, so I'm going to run through brick walls to change it. That's just me, but I think that that's part of the courage that has to go into leadership as well. You have to be willing to do that when the time is right.
Awesome.
Thanks, Will.
Awesome.
Any follow-up, or did that answer it?
No, it did. It did answer, because
right.
Oftentimes for me, especially, I think there's for a lot of my colleagues, there's a bit of timidness to go against the grain and not upset anyone, but I do appreciate your response. We do have some courageous folks, but oftentimes they just need a little push to say, look, if you think it's in the best interest, then by all means.
Well, I
Great.
went against the grain all the time. And I certainly exhausted a lot of people around me because of my tendency to go against the grain. I'm still doing that, but
Yeah.
look at me now.
Yeah.
Right. No,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Will. Thank you. Thank you. Great question. All right, Gord, you're up next. Go ahead, Gord.
I think you unmuted me.
Okay.
I know I did. I'm sorry. You're next, Ted, after Gord. So, Gord, go ahead. Take it away.
So you have identified some education, specifically in criminal justice, that provides critical thinking, effective communication, and such. But is there some specific attributes that one could identify as an effective leader early on in their career?
I have always said, I think that those attributes present themselves with our employees from day one when they walk in the door. We can tell who is an effective communicator. We can tell immediately who exhibits patience. We deal with conflict constantly, especially in law enforcement, but everywhere in the criminal justice system, we deal with conflict. Well, who carries patience into those situations and who doesn't? We're exhibiting leadership within the criminal justice environment from day one. And I don't know that we spend enough time recognizing that, but I think all of those same attributes exist. And I don't think that it's necessary that those attributes only exist within our formal leadership. I think we work best when those same attributes are prevalent across our entire range of personnel. I think for the large part they are. It's a hard job to get, especially in policing. It's a very difficult job to get. Even with recent staffing issues, you still just can't walk in the door. If you apply today, you're not going to start in 2 weeks. It's a difficult job to get. And I don't think that for the most part, the industry is hiring candidates for police officers who don't exhibit some of those traits. Even through the hiring process, I think we pick up on people who are going to be timid, who cannot communicate, who have a lack of patience, all of those things. We can identify those pretty early, and we actually weed them out, I think, before we even present them a job offer. But I really do think it's critical that we cultivate all of those leadership traits in our personnel from day one.
Agreed.
Perfect.
Good question, Gord. Thank you. That's another PhD student of mine.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you, Gord. All right, Ted, you got two questions. Why don't you handle both of them?
Okay.
And,
First question was rather easy, I think. Do you have to be sponsored by your agency to attend one of your courses through Louisville?
It is course dependent. There are certain requirements that are on some of our upper level courses. Our leadership courses do demand that you are an active law enforcement leader with a formal leadership position, and it's not gatekeeping. It's more we need to make sure that people are going to come to us and have some experience level so that they understand nuance and context within some of the concepts that we present. It's very difficult for us to present an executive police leadership program to people who have never been lower level police leaders or even police officers. So in a lot of those cases, yes, there are criteria that people be active and have achieved a certain rank. But we do have other programs. We just finished up here in town. We taught a crime prevention through environmental design course. It's one of the courses that we offer. And I think 50% of the class came from private industry this go around. It's just the way that it worked out. So it isn't mandatory for all of our programs, but it is class specific.
Okay. And then my other question was, thank you for answering that. My other question was, So I work with the union, and we have a lot of officers who come back from suspension or arrest, even though they've been cleared. How do you, overcome that dark cloud that tends to follow you in this degree, not this degree, in this industry? Um, People, I mean, even if you've been cleared 100% not guilty, you went to trial, you went the distance, and you see it oh yeah, no problem, come back to work, you'll be great. They promise you the world, and sure enough, they pass the sergeant's exam, they get on the sergeant's list, they find a reason to skip them, and it's just very deflating for a lot of people. And it's
Yes.
like, when do you, give us a fair shake, or
Well,
how do we? Go ahead.
that's the organizational justice that I was speaking of. If as an industry, our administrations are creating requirements, minimum requirements, and procedures for gaining those promotions. Now, obviously, disciplinary history is going to come into those decisions, but on those cases where we know, this officer was cleared, especially when claims were completely unfounded. In those cases, that's where we really need mature leadership to look objectively at what the promotional processes are. And
But
many people, go ahead.
Doesn't civil service do that? Isn't it pure civil service, like blind testing almost?
In some jurisdictions, but most that I'm aware of, and especially in the West, I don't know where you are, but especially in the West, there's a little bit of a blend. So there will be that official exam, but then they will also go through some assessment center type procedure, in which the idea being that we bring in police executives and leaders from other agencies who have no background with that agency and don't know any of the personnel, and then they're able to kind of give that fresh,
that to me,
untainted view.
That to me is very hybrid model. I do like that part, but the part that always tends to burn me up is when you see skipping the list and you start jumping around, go from, we're at 1, let's go down to 12, and let's go to 17, and I have a sheriff or a chief pick, and it's just it's always it's bad optics. That's my
absolutely
opinion.
Deflating to the personnel of the agency, without question. And that is an absolute perfect example of the lack of organizational justice in some agencies. That speaks to it absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, that's what you were speaking about earlier.
Absolutely. And that is exactly what we are educating our future and current police leadership to try to move beyond. If you have,
I don't want to sound ignorant.
No, go ahead.
I've never heard that term before. Is that something you're coining, or is that like a new term, or is it a term in the industry that I just never heard of?
No, I wish I could take credit for that. I'd write a book.
Okay.
But no, I did not come up with that. I did not come up with organizational justice. But I did first learn about it maybe 5 years ago or so, and it spoke to me with such loud volume that I have carried that torch every day. I think it's a very important concept, and I think that's what we really, it's the type of thing that actually moves mountains within police agencies. If we can build that trust and we can have everybody believing that they're going to be treated fairly, that's really all anybody wants.
Well, and this speaks to the stress and the mental health of the officer themselves. So it's not just the police work, it's not just the danger, it's not just dealing with the public, it's not just the environment, anti-police sentiment, any of that that's happening around us. It's the intra-organizational stressors, one of them being this injustice and sometimes politics playing a role where it doesn't belong. Good question, Ted. Thank you, as always,
Thank you
for your participation.
Thank you for answering.
Yep, excellent. Thank you. All right, cool. So now we're going to bring on Justin, and I'm going to ask them to put their camera on. I'm going to spotlight them. And, Justin is going to be graduating, and I always brag on him. I brag on Layla, too. I mean, these are my undergrads who I love so much. And who are the behind the scenes on everything. But Justin is going to be graduating May 1st, top of his class. He's applied to the DEA. He's got he's actually in process with that, and is going to be doing an exam soon, right? A physical agility thing.
Great.
And so he's got a question for you, Dennis. Take it away, Justin.
Let's have it, Justin.
Okay, so my question, me and Layla were talking, and my question was basically like, since when you started as a police officer and progressed throughout the ranks, how has it been with as far as like dealing with stress? Like I know for sure it has been like there's been more stress, obviously, like with the workload, but has it gotten stressful otherwise becoming like a chief and going up the ranks?
Well, I never made it quite to chief, but there was a larger level of stress than I ever consciously felt at the time I was experiencing it, if that makes sense. I'm able now, since, I mean, the best way to identify how much stress you feel in a law enforcement job is the day after you retire. That's when you really understand how much stress you've been under for decades before. I wish there was a better way. But now even still, I can look back on especially some of those organizational stressors that I felt. I'm in a new organization now, so the potential is still there for organizational stressors. And now a phrase that I did coin myself is organizational scar tissue. I carry that around. I have scars from previous organizational run-ins that have that I still carry into meetings and into professional situations now, where I can sometimes be a little gun shy. Oh, I know it's coming. You know, those little things like, well, hey, I'm going to need to see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Well, I'm not going to sleep all night now because,
Right.
you know, and I know I haven't done anything wrong, you know, but you still carry that. So that is the term that I coined as
Organizational scar tissue.
Yes, that's
I
on me,
love
Dr.
it.
T. That's going to be in my book.
I love it.
But it's there. And I think when I look back, I can certainly identify the certain job specific situations that I was in that caused me some trauma. I can identify that, but very few when compared to the stress that I endured from within my own organization.
Good. Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Great. All right. Before you guys go off, you guys stay a second. Dr. Hippert, last words, anything that you want to say to the viewers. You know, don't forget that while we may have had a smaller audience tonight live, this is recorded so they can go back and watch it. And Justin and Layla upload it tomorrow or the next day or whenever onto Spotify, so it becomes an audio podcast. So it's going to be there in the archives.
Sure.
Anything that you want to say, kind of last words?
I would just say, I think that the future for policing in America is very bright, considering we approach it the correct way. And if we are able to determine what our objective best practices are, what does the literature tell us is going to be the best approach for any situation, remove our emotions to the best of our ability, I think we have a real opportunity as we sit right now to educate our current police leaders, our current police officers, and in our educational programs within our universities. We have a real ability right now to be preparing people to think about policing in a better way moving forward. So I think that we definitely need to take advantage of that. For any police agencies who may see or hear this, I think there's a real opportunity to create incentive and remove barriers for officers to be attending higher education. And I really, really encourage anybody such as you, Justin, if you're interested in this type of a career, you can't get a job until you're 21 anyway. So spend those years between 18 and 21 preparing yourself in the best possible way. And that's exactly what you did. The higher education is the key to being prepared for a very positive, productive career in law enforcement.
And it can't hurt that he's graduating from one of the most prestigious universities
That's right.
on the planet, and one of the best schools of criminal justice there is. So,
Well, you've got Dr. T, so that says it all right there.
well, they teach me a great deal. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hippert. We'll be in touch about the other thing that we talked about before the show started.
Fantastic.
And I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and especially for the contribution that you make to the field.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Have a good night.
And you.
So, before we end, this is our last episode for the season, and it's sad, a little sad. We had a great season. I think that we had a lot of great guests, a lot of great topics, and we're going to be looking at some really interesting topics and guests for next season, for starting in the fall, actually in September. But before we go, I want you to go right behind your shoulder and look on my bookcase there, and you see that there's this guy, and I want you to bring him out because I love him. Now, Justin and Layla gave this to me in Chicago because we didn't get a chance to go on the crime mob tour, but we did get to eat in a really great restaurant that actually Al Capone's second in command, his underboss, Needy, Nitti, used to live there. So anyway, they gifted me with my little Al Capone, which I love, and I couldn't love these two anymore. So thank you again, Layla and Justin. Tomorrow they have a big day. They have a big presentation for the City of Wilton Manors Police Department. They're going to be presenting to Chief Gary Blocker and the command staff there about what they did in Chicago, what happened at the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences Conference and the Alpha Phi Sigma annual meeting. So I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow, 10 o'clock, bright and early, and City of Wilton Manors. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and supporting us.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please, of course.
I just want to say, I know it's our last show and we were just talking about leadership, but I just want to tell you, Dr. T, just heart to heart, that you are honestly one of the best people I've worked for. Just such a great leader. And Dr. T, every show is always just boasting on me and Justin. We never have time to just boast on her and just how amazing she is. So I just want to take this time to just say, Dr. T, it has been a pleasure working for you this semester, which has been my second year. And it's been awesome because you're great. And this was a gift because we were like, we have to appreciate her, give her appreciation. So we love you, Dr. T.
Well, I love you right back. And we have more to come. We have more to do. We have so much more to do next semester, next year. And I'm looking really forward to it. And I'm looking forward to hearing about Justin's career. And we wish him well. Best of luck. Stay safe. Many blessings to you in everything that you do. And you make me look good because you're great. Both of you.
I would have
All right, guys.
Dr. T.
Let's see.
My bobblehead. All right. Make sure his cigar doesn't fall out of his mouth. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to the deans. Thank you, Dean Durham, to Dean Kushner, Tammy Kushner, Dr. Marcelo Castro, all of the deans that support everything that we do. And thank you to everyone who's come on tonight. Stay safe, everybody.